sent Jesus to be born of a virgin and then had him crucified. I mean, those are all truth claims.
Of course, none of that matters as long as it helps us fight Putin. As far as
that's the difference between me and Ayaan. I suspect that she doesn't really believe any of that.
So he questions whether or not she even believes what she's saying she believes in. Christianity is an evil religion. This video is what we're watching with Richard Dawkins being interviewed by none other than Alex O'Connor, who's well-known skeptic, critic, atheist, debates online with Christians all the time, and he gets to sit with Richard Dawkins and talk about Christianity as an evil religion. Here we go. We're going to start off from the very beginning.
Professor Richard Dawkins, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Ayaan Hirsi Ali, recently, despite you being perhaps the world's
They start right off with the well-known atheist who converted to Christianity.
Most famous atheist, described you as one of the most Christian people that she knows. Why did she say that?
I get this comment a lot from Christians because they know that I'm kind, I'm gentle. It's almost like they see the good in someone and they equate that with the Holy Spirit or Jesus or God. And when you get those kind of comments, of course, I'm not offended by it at all. I know they're coming from their context. But this seems to be a common thing with people who are really good, kind people to other people. And especially if you say you were a believer at one point, a lot of Christians see that reference point and go, that's because he may be backslidden and the Spirit's still working within him. And no way for me not to know, I guess, that could be happening, but I'm not convinced.
I adore Ayaan. I'm a great fan of hers. I have talked to her about this. I think the respect in which we differ is that for me, what really matters is the truth claims of Christianity. And for her, what really matters is the morality, the politics, actually. I think for her, Christianity is a bastion against something worse. As Hilaire Belloc said, always keep a hold of nurse for fear of finding something worse. And for her, I think she wants a faith which will help people to stand up against worse faiths.
And look, there's historical precedence for this. The Crusades against Islam. Clearly, he's talking about her experience in Islam. We should react. We should review what she says about her experience with Islam so we understand her reference point. That way we understand why this is a big deal. And I think she did vocalize this in an article that the secular West, those who are within the critical atheist community, don't have the backing, the backbone or the backing, it seems, to really make a dent in the growing Islamic world, Islamicist. I believe that's the term they would use. And she found that Christianity was a better weapon or a better shield than secular, critical, atheistic kind of worldview. I agree, though. I want to know what the truth is. And if she sees the utility in Christianity is far better than, it's worth playing make-believe, so to speak, then being a skeptic and watching the world get consumed by an ideology you think is more wicked than anything, then you're going to go with that path.
She singles out Islam. She singles out China, I think, and Putin and wokeism.
Wokeism, yes.
And I'm with her on all those. And to the extent that I think that a religion might be valuable for political reasons, I would go along with her. But I think it's the wrong way to approach religion. I think that what really matters about a religion is whether it's true. And to adopt a religion for, it's almost as though one is saying, well, I don't believe this nonsense, but it's a very good idea if other people do. And there's something patronizing about that. She doesn't do that. She says, I believe in it. I am a Christian.
And maybe she is. Maybe she has let down all her guard of skeptical, critical, and just is willing to indulge intentionally into what I would say the superstition of Christianity, the cult of Christianity.
And therefore, it's not patronizing. But I think the fundamental motivation is a political and a moral one.
I presume, as both an atheist and as a person with an understanding of not just biological but also mimetic evolution, having coined the term meme, you'll have to think of religion as essentially something which serves some kind of social function. That must be why it exists. That's why it evolved.
Yeah.
Given that that's the case, is it really so inappropriate to think about religion in terms of how it serves us socially? If that, from our shared worldview, it must be what religion really is.
From an academic point of view, I think it's a very interesting question what religion is all about. What does it serve a social function? Does it even have an evolutionary benefit? And that interests me as an academic. To me, though, it's a huge step to go from even saying it's a good thing, even saying that I wish there were more Christianity in the world, even to say that is nothing to do with believing its truth claims. I mean, truth claims like there is a divine creator who made the universe and made the laws of physics. There's a divine creator who made the world, who listens to our prayers, who forgives our sins, who sent Jesus to be born of a virgin and then had him crucified. I mean, those are all truth claims.
Of course, none of that matters as long as it helps us fight Putin. As far as
that's the difference between me and Ayan. I suspect that she doesn't really believe any of that.
So he questions whether or not she even believes what she's saying she believes in, and like, how do you, when you're being critical and using critical thinking skills your whole life and you're skeptical of these things, without actually seeing or experiencing those things for yourself, forsake those faculties to just accept? Maybe you drop those critical faculties, you just surrender to the meaning of it. It's tough for me where I'm at today with what I know now, but I don't know.
And presumably many Christians, and I've seen many Christians reacting to this story of Ayan's conversion, issuing a similar skepticism as many atheists have been, saying, well, we care about Christianity as a set of truth claims. We care about it saying something real about the world. If somebody can become a Christian just by preferring it as a more comfortable worldview, what does that say about Christianity? I mean, I said a moment ago that, well, for us, religion just is a social tool, essentially. And I think that the ability to adopt Christianity just because of its social function is evidence in favor of our case, that that's all religion is.
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, I could imagine if like a massive, I mean, a good thing we have our secular, constitution and being able to come together no matter what our religion is. But if I had to choose, I do have a bias towards Christianity than picking Islam. So I would choose Christianity any day over becoming a Muslim personally.
I think we agree about that. I think where we perhaps don't agree,
but just to address their comment, is that finding the utility of Christianity may actually work into the point that Alex and, of course, Dawkins here is talking about.
I wouldn't say we disagree. I would say that our fundamental motivation is a bit different, because I think that for you, well, if I ask you what you think the worst thing about Christianity is, I suspect you say something moral, something about the problem of evil, something about the horrific ideas of Paul and the early Christian fathers, that we're all born in sin and we needed the death of Jesus to save us. That's the kind of thing that I suspect drives your atheism. Whereas for me, that's irrelevant. I mean, for me, I talk about it, but for me, what really drives it is the scientific question: is there a creator underneath the universe? Because if there is, then it's a profoundly different kind of universe from a scientific point of view. From if there isn't, to me, that's the big question. The problem of evil, to me, shouldn't be a real problem, because you just say, well, there could be an evil God. That's a lesser question for me.
Yeah, some have to negotiate with this God, right? And they have to believe in the evil God and make justifications for why God can do evils and cause harm and all that. Calvinists often are willing to swallow, I create good, I create evil. I create light and darkness, good and evil. I, the Lord, do all these things from the book of Isaiah. But other Christians, like Marcion and others, and even non-Marcionites and stuff, have found ways to try and soften this. But Marcion specifically talked about the demiurge in not so great terms. But I don't know if that's the driving force behind Alex's atheism. It may play a part, but I know he did a lot of philosophy stuff as well. So let's see what he says.
Yes, I think I actually do broadly agree with you, and that when I explain why I don't believe in God, I do make reference to things like the problem of evil, but it's difficult for me to frame those as moralistic objections. It's more that when considering a particular worldview like Christianity, I think what would I expect the world to look like? And especially considering how suffering is built into the evolutionary system, it makes it very difficult for me to believe that this is being supervised. But like you say, this could just be an evil God. I'm really interested in your characterization of the existence of God and the beginning of the universe as a scientific question. And I wanted to probe this a little bit,
yes,
because I had a thought that was inspired by something that C.S. Lewis had said on the relationship between science and religion. And I have this image in my head of people who are really optimistic about the progress of science and the scientific method. And they say something like, look, years ago, we used to say so much was down to God. We used to not know why the planets orbited the sun, and we said it was because angels was pushing them. We used to not know why there was so much complexity in biological life, and we said that God did it. But look how we're discovering these laws. We're discovering the law of natural selection. We're discovering the laws of gravity, And there seems to be this trajectory such that when we say, well, where did it all come from in the first place? One day we'll get there. Now, I don't know if you agree with that as an optimistic trajectory for the scientific method.
Clearly, there's a trajectory, and I would put it that the big problem of design, as William Paley put it, was life. He said something like the physical world is not the best place in which to demonstrate the existence of the creator because it's too simple. And I think he was right. And he was also right when he said that the really big problem for religion is life. And
yes.
his whole book is based upon looking at design in the living world. Darwin solved that. So Darwin solved the big one. And
just keeps pushing the goalpost, right? The next thing needs to be filled in, God. The next thing, God.
We have some remaining problems. The arc hasn't really reached its end. We still have some problems with the origin of the laws of physics, the origin of the universe. But I think that the fact that Darwin solved the big one should give us confidence. That was the really difficult one. The amazing apparent design in the living world. I mean, that is such a staggeringly overwhelming impression of design. There's no question about that. And that was the one that Darwin solved.
And people love to quote this about Richard Dawkins saying this and go, ooh, it looks like it's designed. And Richard Dawkins, of course, says that it so overwhelmingly looks like someone designed it. And then he's saying Darwin obviously solved this problem.
Darwin solves the problem of complexity within living organisms, but I think it might be a step too far to say he solved the problem of life, because of course one of the questions that we have to throw into that bundle of things yet to explain, the origin of physics,
yes,
the origin of life.
Life. Well, that's not part of Darwinism, of course. That's a separate question, and Darwin acknowledged that. And that is an unsolved problem. It may never be solved in the sense that we may never actually know what the answer is. I think the best we can probably hope for is a model which is so elegant that we may say, well, that's so elegant, it's got to be true. But that's a bit different from having direct evidence.
So they're dealing with abiogenesis, it seems, or some form of it. And again, with the recent discovery of potential life on Mars, questions just keep coming up. How did the life on Mars, which is now obviously extinct, get there? That's a problem. A problem that should raise up good questions on if it got there, meaning life somehow in some form, even if it is organically, small, not significant to evolve at the level it did here on Earth, that it got there. Well, how did life get here? And if it could get there on Mars, are you going to sit there and say God, went and took a chunk of clay and created man out of that on Mars? I mean, when do you stop having to come up with that hypothesis and use it?
At present, we don't really have that. We have various possible ideas, with some of them more plausible than others. And I think we know the kind of question we're trying to answer. We're trying to answer, how did the first self-replicating entity come into existence? And that's a big question. It only had to happen once. Unlike the rest of evolution, where it happened over and over and over again, the same thing happened over and over again all over the world, different continents, different species, different kinds of animal and plant, and so on. The origin of life could have been a very, very improbable event because it only had to happen once. And therefore we are potentially allowed to postulate something very unlikely, something very implausible. I find that quite an interesting point, actually,
Yeah, but implausible between abracadabra, or implausible as in it may not be a common thing that happens in the natural world, but we're here, it happened.
I mean, if you take it to an extreme, so suppose we are the only planet in the universe which has life, we can't rule that out. I think it's highly unlikely, but we can't rule it out. If that's true, then that means that the origin of life on this planet was a stupendously improbable event. And therefore, when chemists try to postulate a possible scenario for the origin of life, they're not looking for a plausible argument. They're looking for a very implausible argument.
That's fascinating, yeah.
Now, I don't believe that, because I think that probably it was not that improbable an event, and therefore the likelihood is that there's lots of life all over the universe. But even to say a million different life forms all over the universe, since the number of possible places where there could be life is so large.
Yes.
A million is actually a very small number.
That's fascinating. I mean, there are many things in the universe that have a tiny, tiny chance of happening, but could. Like, you know, I've heard physicists say that because atoms are just vibrating and they're all sort of vibrating against each other, and hence we get stillness. There's a very small, unimaginably small possibility, but a real one, that this glass could just sort of spontaneously move across the table if all of the atoms, you know, happen to vibrate in that direction. Now, the universe, like you say, I mean, everybody talks about the universe being vast. I read, I think this morning, that if the sun were the size of a white blood cell, then the Milky Way would be the size of the continental United States. Now,
terrifying.
We might need to fact check that exact example, but it's and that's just the Milky Way. And when you consider that,
a white blood cell, that is just impossible to even wrap our minds around.
Oh, are you saying that, you know, in a materialistic universe, life can just sort of pop into existence? Well, I understand the suspicion that might be something unimaginably unlikely, but we're in an unimaginable universe. So that's a wonderful way of thinking.
I wouldn't want to resort to that. Right. I think we don't need to. By the way, the possibility of the glass moving across the table, it's there. But I once asked a physicist what the probability is, and he said if you started writing zeros at the origin of the universe, you'd still be writing zeros at this.
Right.
So we probably don't have to go that far in our. We can have a sort of spectrum of improbabilities,
and I can already see a theist cutting this up and saying atheists admit that their worldview.
So we don't want to go there.
Yep, that's right.
Imaginably unlikely.
We don't want to go there. I mean, my gut feelings. Carl Sagan said, "But I try not to think with my gut." But if I'm forced, my gut feeling would be that there is lots of life around the universe, but still it could be so rare that we don't have much chance of ever meeting any of these other life.
Suppose we prove that Mars does have some kind of organic life. What would that do to that idea that life in various forms is everywhere, or all over in various solar systems, or in various on various planets in which are all over, you know, the universe? That would be, again, it would be a way of showing that we're not unique in the sense of the original or only planet that likely has life. It would be silly to suppose that uniqueness that, of course, a lot of theistic circles tend to push.
Sure. That's fascinating. But let's push the question even further back still, because I wanted to ask you, you mentioned about the origin of the laws of physics, for example.
Yes.
Now, the story that we tell is something like we discover all of these laws, And so this gives us an idea that science is moving in a direction, and that eventually we may well discover the origin of the laws themselves. But that seems to me like a separate question. And the way I want to explain this is by sort of borrowing and adapting, as I say, something C.S. Lewis said. Lewis talks about the relationship between Hamlet and Shakespeare a fair bit, or the character in a book and his author. I mean, I can ask, why did Sherlock Holmes move into Baker Street? And you can either say, well, it's because, he was looking for a roommate or something like that. Or you could say, because Arthur Conan Doyle wanted him to. And both of those seem to be true in a different resolution of thought. Now, what I'm imagining here is us discovering Hamlet by Shakespeare on the table in front of us. And immediately, crudely, you look at it and say, well, that must have been designed. That must have an author. And I don't just do the William Paley thing. It's complex. What I say is, well, look, Professor Dawkins, I've done some research onto this little book, and I've discovered that it obeys certain laws. I've noticed that at the end of certain sentences, there are these little dots. And if there's a big dot, it usually means that it's the end of a sentence. And there are two different kinds of each letter. There's a big A and a little a. And if it's the beginning of a sentence, it's a new one. Also, we've discovered this thing called iambic pentameter. It seems that the way these sentences are constructed seem to follow this law of literacy. And I said to you, now, where did this book come from? And you say, I still think there was an author of this book. I still think someone created it. And I said, yeah, but look at all the progress that we've made just by describing it in terms of these things that we're calling laws of literature. I've discovered all of these laws of literature, iambic pentameter and sentence construction and grammar and all of this stuff. Surely one day these laws of literacy will go on to explain the origin of the laws of the literacy or the origin of the text itself. Surely that would be where this is going. But of course, I'm making a category error if I do that. And is there not a fear that we're doing that when we say that science will one day explain the origin of the very thing that science is about?
I take confidence from, as I said before, from Darwin's success, because everything that you said about full stops and capital letters at the beginning of the sentence, iambic pentameters and things, you could have said that about life, and people did say that about life. And we notice that living things are remarkably well designed, that birds are beautifully designed to fly, and fish are beautifully designed to swim, and so on.
Designed.
And the complexity is all there. The detail of the design is incredibly impressive, and it would have seemed absolutely. I mean, I suspect this is why it took so long for Darwin to come on the scene, actually, because it just seemed so obvious that it had an author.
Sure,
but behind it.
Yeah, it would be intuitive, right, for all of us to suspect someone. We already suspect agency in things that we would say we're not convinced agency. Earthquakes, volcanoes, list goes on and on. Well, life, no brainer. Look at humans. Well, we must be, we're special. We must be made to look like the gods, image of God stuff.
Darwin solves that. There isn't an author. I mean, it's natural selection does the trick. So where is the analogy with Hamlet or Sherlock Holmes left?
I suppose the analogy would be that what Darwin did was close the question on the complexity of life, but he didn't close the question on where life came from, as we've already agreed.
That's right.
And I suppose what I'm putting forward is that maybe laws of physics, laws of biology, laws of science are not the kind of thing that can explain the origin of the laws of physics, the origin of the laws of biology, that kind of stuff, where maybe it's sort of operating on a.
Well, it could be. I mean, we haven't got there yet, but all I said was that Darwin's success should give us confidence, and that there will come a time when we understand the laws of physics. I think we're not far off. Not we. I mean, the physicists aren't far off that now. In fact,
Richard Dawkins is about.
Ladies and gentlemen, I get what Alex is saying. If I pick up a book, and I know this is probably a terrible analogy, but nonetheless, it's something that, Alex is saying, hey, look, we see literacy, letters, the various forms of genre, and we see that it has a certain rhythm to it that is obviously taking it piece by piece from the ink, from the papyrus to paper, whatever it is, letters, the whole nine, right? You take DNA, you take evolution, you take life, its structure, all of this. And we're kind of fish in the fish tank who don't see the water. So we start picking apart the details. We can see the function of it, and we can see how it operates. But you can never get back to the mechanic himself, to the author themselves, while we're picking apart the details. Problem is, we don't see the author, so there's an invisible Pied Piper. I've heard that saying from some people who have this idea. But at the end of the day, I get what he's saying. It's just when you have to look and factor in how evolution operates, that life cannibalizes itself to continue, either if there is some author outside of all of this that made it all, is so radically foreign to anything we have any clue about in making a world where suffering and death is like the chief thing that progresses the next species to evolve, and it accommodates and adapts to new environment and all the various things that are super complex within evolution of how humans and other animals came to be, and plant life, you name it, will change depending on environment and all this stuff. This thing would be so alien to anything we would even have any idea about. Clearly, we have no reason to see it and know that it's there. I get what Alex is saying. What if we find out that we figure out that organic, life can arise like abiogenesis? We already suppose that, but imagine we prove it, or we come up with a really strong case to show that it happens under these conditions, and like he said earlier, a model can be built. At the end of the day, I'm still left scratching my head going, okay, why do we have to push that there has to be this author? Why wouldn't we allow the universe to be what it is without necessarily needing to invoke something you can never know is there or isn't there? You have no way of knowing if there's something that made all this, or if there's nothing, and it's just the universe and the way we are inside of this universe, just the way it is. The laws function the way they do, or the particulars of this universe function the way they do, and that's just how it's always been. It's hard for us to even comprehend or wrap our heads around because we have a beginning, a middle, and an end. I don't know if we'll ever get closer to knowing that answer, or if we'll ever even be able to solve this enigma. It may always remain a mystery, but people think, looking to design examples we have in front of us, intuitively they suppose by looking at the world around us through nature that there must also be this designer. And they look to DNA, as you saw in the other debate I was reviewing with Christopher Hitchens and Frank Turek. They look to DNA, they look to these things, and then there's a lot in front of us. We go, why would a creator even make something like that, or even set the system to roll so that it cannibalizes itself? And it's still doing that today. In order for us to survive, we need energy. Instead of photosynthesis, we have to eat life. And oftentimes humans eat animals, but other life has to die in order for us to live. And either way you slice it, it's a hell of a system. To think that there must be a designer behind that or involved in that is a very odd designer, if there is one, behind it all. So what are your thoughts? Look, I'm not a philosophical guru. I'm hip-firing here on my thoughts, but I'd like to know yours in the comments. And if you like these reaction videos, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell. If you don't like these videos, no problem. Enjoy this one. But I really hope to hear from you in the comment section, because I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on how you might resolve this issue. And until next time, see you then.